Yes. Yes. I know. I know. Q, the video was supposed to be yesterday. I know. I know. I had a situation yesterday where I couldn't film the video. So, I'm going to film it today. I'm going to watch nothing but scary stories for 1 hour. 1 hour. We're going to sit through it. And the stories are completely random. I'm not picking them out. I'm just gonna let it play. They're all by Mr. Nightmare, and I may or may not leave timestamps for which story I'm listening to because I just honestly it's completely random. So, without further ado, I'm just gonna sit back, relax. You guys sit back, relax, because this is gonna be probably gonna be my longest video yet. No intro. I'm not gonna put an outro or anything. We're just gonna watch and have some fun. All right. Some of these videos are gonna be quick. Some of these videos are gonna be pretty long. So sit back, get your popcorn, get something to drink or nothing. I got nothing, so I'm just gonna sit here and listen to these stories. All right, let's get to it. Let me turn it down.
You are home alone, and you hear on the news about the profile of a murderer who is on the loose. You look out the sliding glass doors to your backyard, and you notice a man standing out in the snow. He fits the profile of the murderer exactly, and he's smiling at you. You gulp, picking up the phone to your right and dialing 911. You look back out the glass as you press the phone to your ear, and notice he is much closer to you now. You then drop the phone in shock. There are no footprints in the snow.
Yo.
It's his reflection.
Dude. Alright, never invite in strangers. Scary story. The last one was called Home Alone. This one's never invite in strangers. Let's get to it.
I recently moved into a big house, just temporarily. It's kind of a complicated situation. The house belongs to a family member. They're going to be gone for a few months, that sort of thing. I was going to be there on my own, so I was a little nervous. There wasn't anything in the house when I moved in. There is now. I was in the main hallway unpacking some stuff when the doorbell rang.
Nah.
That put me on edge right away, because the house is at the end of a long drive and kind of out of the way. You would basically have to go looking for this house to find it. There was an old woman at the door. This was in broad daylight, but there was still something kind of off about her.
Don't let her
She was really tall, like a full head taller than me.
Nope.
And there was something weird about the way she looked. It was like none of her clothes even fit her properly.
Nope.
She shook my hand and smiled, and told me that she was from the neighborhood council or something.
Red flags.
She asked if she could come in and talk to me. My gut reaction was to say no, but I couldn't really think of a reason to.
What?
She was just an old woman. What was she going to do?
What?
I really wished I had just slammed the door in her face. I brought her into the living room, and she sort of tottered behind me. Like her feet didn't even fit into her shoes properly. She sat down without asking and grinned at me until I took a seat across from her. For about half a minute she didn't say anything, just smiled and stared at me, while I got increasingly awkward. Just as I was about to break the silence, she fished in her pocket and pulled out this really big old-fashioned sweet. The type that comes in a see-through wrapper.
Here,
She said.
eat this.
I'm cool.
I should
Cool,
probably
thanks.
point out here that she spoke really quietly, so it was difficult to hear anything she said. I accepted the sweet and unwrapped it. It was dark red, almost black. I popped it in my mouth because she was still grinning at
alright,
me
man.
and nodding her head.
I'm alright.
Have you ever walked around behind
It's
a
cool.
supermarket where they keep the big bins? They throw meat that's gone bad in those. Imagine that rancid smell, but on a hot summer day. It's so thick you can almost feel it in the air.
Just in the volume.
That's what the sweet tasted like. I wanted to spit the thing out on the floor, but social niceties made me chew the thing and force it down my throat.
No, that is disgusting.
The woman was talking all the time, but between the taste and her quiet voice, I barely heard her. My mouth tasted like rotten meat, so I politely told her I was going to get some water and ran into the kitchen.
Don't leave her by herself.
When I came back, she was gone.
Idiot.
I had been in the kitchen for less than 30 seconds.
Bruh. Why would you?
My first reaction probably should have been to assume that she went to the bathroom or had to leave in a hurry. Instead, I searched the entire house. I went through every single room, convinced I was going to open a closet or look under a bed and see her stuffed in there, grinning at me.
No.
That didn't happen, obviously, but I was still extremely on edge as the sun started to go down. That night, I propped a chair against my bedroom door because I just couldn't shake the feeling that the woman was still in the house somewhere, hiding.
I can't.
I woke up at around 2 in the morning and heard creaking floorboards downstairs.
She's in the house.
It was an old house and unfamiliar. I kept telling myself that until the noises stopped. When I woke up the next morning, there was a red sweet on the living room table. I'll tell you the same thing I told the police. No, I couldn't be absolutely certain that the sweet wasn't there the day before. Maybe I just overlooked it, but I didn't think so. They told me that the organization the woman claimed to come from didn't actually exist, and I was clearly wasting their time. After they left, I searched the entire house again, and the grounds. Then I searched them again. By the time I was finished, I managed to calm down a bit and look at the situation rationally.
What?
The woman probably left the suite there the previous day.
You're so naive.
And I just didn't notice. I had searched the whole house twice now.
You're being naive.
There was nowhere she could possibly be hiding.
She's in the house.
Probably just some doddery old lady
who
wandered
not.
off while I was in the kitchen.
No, she's not.
As I prepared to go to bed, I had managed to fully delude myself into thinking nothing strange was going on.
I need a gun, bro.
I decided not to do anything childish, like blocking my door again, because what was I afraid of? Even if she was somehow still inside the house somewhere, what could this old lady even do to me?
You'll be surprised.
At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up abruptly, knowing in the back of my mind that something was wrong. I guess I must have heard something in my sleep. I turned onto my side and reached out to turn on the bedside lamp, groping around because I was in an unfamiliar room. When the light came on, I saw the old woman standing right next to my bed.
No.
I only got a glimpse of her because as soon as I screamed, she scuttled backward out the door really fast. I only got the briefest glimpse of her before she vanished into the unlit hallway outside my door.
You don't have your hallway light on?
I now believe that the human brain has a special compartment for dealing with the experiences far outside of the realm of the natural. If I had woken up to find a burglar in my room, I probably would have gone numb with panic. If there was a lion at the foot of my bed, I'd be too paralyzed with fear to do anything. But as soon as I saw the woman,
I wouldn't know what to do in that situation, honestly.
That special compartment took over. I jumped out of bed and slammed the door shut, then shoved the chair up against the handle. Then I dashed for my phone.
What?
No signal, no internet. I later found out that there was nothing wrong with the phone or the local service. I think she was interfering with it somehow. The drop from the bedroom window wasn't too high. If I landed just right, I'd probably avoid injury. But what if I sprained an ankle or broke my leg? I had a sudden vision of pulling myself across the dark garden while the woman sprinted after me, and I decided I didn't want to risk it. That gave me two options. Wait out the night in my bedroom, or try to get out of the house.
Get out the house now. Get out now.
The second one.
There you go.
I had an idea my flimsy barricade wouldn't hold if the woman decided it wanted back in. I broke one of the chair legs off and crept slowly into the hallway, reaching carefully for the light switch. When I pressed it, the lights came on for a second, then faded out. I flicked the switch a few more times, nothing. Some gut instinct told me she was sabotaging them somehow. I used my phone for light as I slowly, quietly crept along the upstairs hallway and down the stairs. The light barely traced the shapes of the walls in the dark.
This is really scary.
Of open doorways. I jumped at every single shadow and unidentifiable shape.
This would be a great short. This would be a great short horror film, bro.
Would appear out of the shadows.
Like this is creepy as a story, but as a short horror film, this would be a great story.
The chain in place.
Like, to adapt,
Just as
not
I was
to,
reaching for the first
you know.
lock, I heard rapid, uneven footsteps at the top of the stairs approaching swiftly.
No.
I undid the first lock.
No.
A high-pitched shriek came from halfway down the stairs,
No.
and I screamed as I undid the second lock and wrenched the door open. It stuck fast. I had forgotten the chain. I glanced behind me and saw the tall, spindly shape of the woman half running, half falling down the stairs toward me, with her head lolling backward and her mouth hanging open. I can't even remember getting the chain off. I might actually have just yanked the door open so hard that I broke it. In any case, the last I saw of the woman was her face inches away from me as I slammed the door shut.
No.
I sprinted to the nearest house, and eventually they called
Run.
the police, possibly because I was half delirious with fear and babbling incoherently. The police once again failed to find anything unusual. It's been a week. I'm staying at a friend's place, sleeping with the lights on and the bedroom door barricaded. The house's real owners aren't back yet. I'm not sure what I'm going to tell them, but I have to stop them from going back there somehow. This is not a haunting.
I can't.
It's an infestation.
Mm-mm.
I can't stop thinking about all of the holes in our defenses, the windows and doors left open, the strangers invited into our living rooms. I just hope to God it's the house she wanted and not me.
Though this isn't very typical of teens, I loved going to my grandma's house. My grandma lives out on a farm in Iowa. I
Low
don't
Red
live there,
Riding Hood, by the
so
way.
I eagerly waited for the few times a year we went out there. It was so fun. So much space to run around, plenty of animals to play with, and she even had a pool. And she gave me lots of sweets, too. Anyway, it was just over a year ago. My parents, my aunts and uncle and I were all out there for Memorial Day. Memorial Day is in April, so it was a bit chilly. My mom told me I could bring my favorite red hoodie.
Nice.
She hated the thing, so that's why I was excited. A few days into the trip, I wasn't doing anything, so I hopped on my computer, turned on some music, and shut the door to the room I was staying in. My music was on half volume, so it was pretty loud. Anyway, I was just sitting there, typing away as I always do, when I heard my grandma's dog begin to bark. Now, her dog barks, just not that loud. It scared the crap out of me, so I ripped out my earbuds and listened. I don't know what I was waiting for, but eventually I slowly got up and walked downstairs, flinching at every creak. I told myself over and over again, you're in the country. No one would break into a house in the country. I walked cautiously into the living room, where my grandma and aunt were sitting. My grandma, though, had gotten up to let the dog out. What happened? I asked. Don't know. The dog just started spazzing, thinking she saw something outside, and it wasn't no normal bark, something fierce, my aunt said. I stared out the window as I saw my grandma and her dog outside. There was a drop-off on the driveway they were standing on, so the dog just paced along the side as if trying to figure out the fastest way down, or showing that she protected the place. As I looked, I could swear I saw a pair of golden eyes looking from the few trees that spaced the house from the barn. I brushed it off, telling myself it was one of the many cats my grandma had wandering the farm.
Don't brush that off.
When my grandma came back inside, I asked,
that sounds off.
what was out there?
What,
I don't know.
A big dog?
The dog's calmed down now and is eating some
food. A big
food,
dog?
she said.
Is that what you're going to say?
I looked at her for a second, shrugged, then went back downstairs. Nothing unusual happened the rest of the night, until I went to bed.
Oh my god.
That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid there listening to music as those golden eyes floated through my mind. They had to have just been a cat, right?
No.
As the night wore on, I finally began to
cat.
drift off to sleep. Just as I did, my eyes shot open as I saw the door begin to open very slowly.
No.
I froze, watching in horror as the door slowly opened completely on its own. The fact that it was opening wasn't what scared me.
This music is
it
not
was
helping.
The fact that I didn't hear it at all. I had my music on lower because the house was quieter, and that door was probably the loudest door ever in existence.
What?
Suddenly, I was getting up. I walked over and slipped on my favorite red hoodie.
Why?
All the while, I stared out the window, seeing those golden eyes. I turned and walked downstairs,
They're probably...
not making a sound.
I can't.
That's odd. As if following something, I went to go out the sliding glass door that led to the pool. Walking along the pathway,
Why
I
would
kept
you go
going.
outside if you
When the
see
pavement
the
turned to dirt
eyes
and
watching
rocks
you?
poked at my bare feet in painful ways,
Why would you do
I
that?
still kept going.
Why would you do that?
Finally, I walked around the barn and to the side that was hidden from sight from the house. What was awaiting me there truly terrified me. It stood about 10 feet tall. It had its back turned to me, but I knew exactly what to expect the moment it turned around.
Why would you do that?
Glowing golden eyes. I felt no fear, only the warmth
Why
of
would
safety,
What?
which in all terrified me because the giant hulking monster inched its way closer to me.
Are you crazy?
As it came close, I could make out more features.
Uh-huh.
It looked like a cross between a wolf and a human.
That's a
Except
werewolf.
the limbs weren't at all as gracefully shaped as they should have been.
Oh.
They were mangled and scarred, patches of its fur missing, revealing wounds. Some were even fresh and bleeding.
Oh my god.
Finally, it stood right in front of me. Its eyes
No.
seemed to bore into my soul.
No.
And then, it seemed to smile. Well,
No.
smile about as good as a wolf can.
No.
Hello, darling.
No.
Its voice was gravelly and deep. He
No.
moved and gently picked me up.
I promise you, this will not hurt one bit.
Suddenly, he chomped down and tore off my leg. It hurt at first, but the pain disappeared after a few seconds. He lay me down onto the gravel, still smiling.
Blood Red Riding Hood. That's what I shall call you now.
This is torture.
And he bounded away. I lay there for a few moments,
Kid,
and
you're
then
stupid.
the pain rushed to my leg. I cried out and shifted my head, just in time to see the headlights of a car that was a few feet in front of me
About
and
to get
about to
ran
run
over.
me over.
You're about to get ran over. Bro.
I awoke with a start from the horrid dream. My music was still playing next to me.
Oh, that was a dream.
I looked up at the window to see it was morning. Pulling down my covers, I saw my leg was still there, completely undamaged. I shook my head at the thought of the nightmare, but I froze when I looked down at the sketchbook I had left on the floor. In big letters, written in blood, was a single word.
Delicious.
Tapping and knocking. Next story. Let's get to it.
When I was around 13, I moved into a relatively large house in a small neighborhood.
Oh my god.
My room was on the second story, and I had a window that was almost completely hidden by the high headboard of my bed.
If a house looks
I
anything
say
like
almost
that,
completely hidden because
in the picture right
about
here,
a quarter of it could have been seen above the headboard. I was, and still am, really paranoid about people watching me,
Oh
so
my
I would
God.
feel uncomfortable at night while on my computer, even though
Oh
it
my
seemed
God.
impossible for someone to look into a window several feet off of the ground. Whenever the thought would come into my head, I would take the pillows from my bed and put them on the top of the headboard to cover the window.
okay.
After a few months of living there, I would sometimes hear tapping. It was as if somebody was knocking on wood. At first it was 1 or 2 knocks, but after a while it would be 3 or 4 knocks.
No.
It didn't happen very often, but it always happened at night.
Night. Okay.
I told my father, who was the only other person that lived in the house, but he would always dismiss it as the cat. After enough
The cat.
convincing, I decided that it was probably the cat. After a year passed, with the tapping happening every other day or so,
Oh my
my
god.
cat
bro.
passed away. It was sad because I had her since she was just a kitten, and her passing away was very unexpected. She was an indoor cat and somehow managed to get outside. We thought she had just ran away at first, but
No.
after a week of searching, we found her. She had been killed by what we assumed was a dog or other wildlife creature. I didn't hear the tapping after my cat died, so that comforted me in that I knew it was indeed her who was doing it. Or so I thought.
After around a month,
What in the
I heard
world?
the tapping again. This time, it wasn't the sound of wood. It was the sound of somebody tapping on a window. I was facing the computer and facing away from the almost covered window, so hearing the tapping and hearing it so clearly,
No.
I didn't really know what to do.
No.
I ran out of the room and told my dad.
This music
He
is
came
not
into the room
helping
and
at
looked out the
all.
window to find nothing. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. Or rather, I wouldn't sleep. We moved a few weeks later due to my father being promoted and needing to move closer to his work. The worst part about the whole thing is that I recently found out that the people that moved into our house after us were murdered in the house during the night. Their killer was apparently an old neighbor that broke into their home via the window. According to my father, who was relaying this news to me, the killer's house had several pictures of our house inside it. The pictures dated back to around 2006, when we still lived in the house.
Yo! The Pursuer.
The last pale streaks of light were fading quickly behind the city's expanse that evening. The street, still damp from a recent rain, glimmered thinly.
Okay.
The streetlights had not yet flickered to life, and the street was hanging suspended in that breathless, squinting moment between light and dark.
Nah.
I was on my way home from what had been a difficult job, leaving me exhausted and grim.
I
I took
you.
long steps, my hands balled into fists that were shoved deep into my pockets. It was chilly, not a biting cold, but a murmuring one.
Okay.
A cold that sent its pallid hands lightly creeping along your skin. Whispers of touch that raised goose pimples, hair, and suspicion. I felt my heart rate quicken, my breathing become labored. I paused, eyes fluttered shut, and I heard the muted crunch of a single footstep behind me.
No. No.
Then nothing.
Halt.
There was someone following me.
Yeah. Okay.
I set off at a dead run,
There you go.
all springs and gears turning, and now there was no mistaking it.
Nope.
I most certainly had a pursuer. I didn't look back, I only ran. My feet slapped pavement hard, jarring. We ran together, my pursuer and I, a manic, high-stakes dance, through side streets, back alleys, and over garbage cans. Finally, we reached my street. I jumped one-handed over a fence, through a backyard, and ran to my front stoop.
That's smart.
I reached my front door, a mad scramble with my keys. I knew if I could only make it to the basement before I was caught, I would be home free. I ran to the basement door, shoved it open, then
That's
tore
where you
down
want
the
to
stairs,
avoid.
jumping down the last 2 steps before hiding in the shadows.
Alright, you gonna hide in the shadows. Okay.
My pursuer slowed as he
Ambush
crept down the
this guy.
stairs of my basement, each footfall descending him further into the murky gloom. A weak ray of light shining down the basement stairs allowed me to see my pursuer's hand, brushing and feeling his way along the cold basement wall, searching for a light switch.
No.
I heard his every breath, ragged and heavy.
He out of
As
breath.
his hand met with the light switch, he quickly flicked it on. I watched as the man in the blue uniform stood frozen in terror as his gaze swept over the room. From the blood-stained walls to the gory freezer in the corner to what was left of my previous dinner on the surgical table. He didn't hear me creep up behind him, but he must have felt the throbbing bulge in my pocket as I emptied a full syringe into the flesh of his neck. Well, officer, I whispered into the policeman's ear as his body went limp. Looks like you've solved this case. A maniacal grin crept its way across my lips.
Yo, that plot twist killed me. Oh my god, that was a cop the entire time? Yo. That was a great story. I think that was my favorite one so far. That twist, I did not see that coming. The narrator was the culprit and the pursuer was a police officer. That is crazy. This is called It's Just the Thunder.
I've always been afraid of thunder, ever since I was a child.
Thunder's relaxing.
It's a bit strange considering I've never really been afraid of lightning. only the thunder that followed.
Why are you...
Maybe it's the noise or the sudden vibrations, but something about it just chills me to the bone.
What? It's
Sorry to
relaxing.
ramble on, but it does have something to do with my story.
Okay.
My story begins in the middle of the woods. You see, I used to be what the civilized referred to as a hermit. I used to live in a log cabin out in the woods. You'd probably think it had something to do with the beauty of nature, but really I was just tired of all the hustle and the bustle of the big city. Of course, I no longer live in said cabin, but we'll get to that soon enough.
What the...
It was a dark and stormy night. A bit cliche, I know. I had drifted off to sleep in my lounge chair, a half-filled glass of red wine in my left hand. Suddenly, I woke to what sounded like a loud crash. Assuming somebody might have broken into my house, I grabbed the closest object I could find, which happened to be a fire poker.
Okay.
I checked each room carefully and sighed with relief that no one had really broken in.
You're being
I
paranoid,
then turned
man.
my attention to the dark red stain spread across the crotch of my pants and all over my linen rug. I was about to go and change when suddenly another loud crash rang out. Startled, I fell back into my chair, gasping as if I'd run out of oxygen. I quickly jumped back onto my feet and began to pace. Another loud crash rang out, followed by the frail log cabin shaking. I was about to head for my bedroom to cower beneath my covers when suddenly, as if out of nowhere, another crash could be heard. However, this time I was certain it wasn't the storm. The sound had come from my attic.
Yo.
I stood still in fear of what was to come. I grabbed my hunting rifle and headed for the hatch to the attic. As I stood below, all that could be heard was silence. In my mind, I had decided that it was most likely a rodent of some kind messing around up there, and so I slowly
Y'all
put down my
blowing
gun
stuff
and headed
off,
back
bruh.
into my room.
I'm not
I tried to fall
investigating, I'm
asleep,
out.
but all I could think about was the looming storm above and that noise. I was finally about to drift off to sleep when suddenly a noise could be heard from down the hall. It was so quiet it couldn't have been anything. However, my mind refused to dismiss this. I listened for a good 5 minutes, but alas, all that could be heard was silence. By then I was afraid, so I stood up and went to go lock my bedroom door. What came next nearly gave me a heart attack. I was standing before the door, ready to lock it, when it creaked open slightly. I jumped backwards onto my bed, hyperventilating, and almost as if on cue, another loud crash of thunder could be heard. I looked around my room, too mortified to stand up.
No.
Sadly, there were no weapons to be found. I had left my only gun in the hallway. I quickly stood up and rushed to close the door, but for some reason, no matter how hard I pushed, the door just wouldn't close. And that's when I saw it. A dull, gray eye could be seen through the crack of the open door, staring back at me. I pushed one last time and reluctantly the door slammed shut. Thunder was the least of my worries. I thought of where I could possibly go. Even if I did climb out of the window, I still lived in the middle of a dense forest. My thoughts were cut short when I heard a slow but rhythmic banging coming from my door. I decided to take my chances. I rushed over to my window and propped it open with an umbrella my mother had given me as a child. Despite my rather large body,
What is
I
this
somehow
music?
managed to fit through my window quite nicely. After climbing through my window, I fell face first into the mud,
Ew.
but somehow I didn't seem to care. All that
know.
mattered was getting out of the woods. I sprung onto my feet, running off into the distance. As I ran, I occasionally glanced back to see if that thing was following me. However, that all changed when I began to hear a swift, rhythmic pounding on the ground behind me. I picked up in pace, sprinting as if I were running a marathon. Thunder rang throughout the woods once more, and I jumped, falling face first into a tree. I knew I was doomed. I lay there in a daze, listening as the pounding grew closer. Ready to face death, I turned around, only to see nothing.
Wow.
There was nothing there except seemingly endless rows of trees. After that, I
Okay.
moved out of the woods and back into my old apartment.
You're...
I never did return to that cabin.
Nah, whatever.
I had my friends collect my stuff from the cabin, and from what I was told, there was nothing inside that could be considered unusual or out of the ordinary. I remember seeing the eye, but was there really anything pursuing me in the woods that night? I often find myself thinking about that night and analyzing every critical detail, and yet I always end up with nothing. What was that thing, and what did it want from me?
Who knows, man?
In the end, fears have the ability to mess with your mind, so maybe, just maybe, it was just the thunder.
Yeah. Crawl space.
In my room, there's a small door leading to where the air conditioning unit is housed.
No.
This door has no locking mechanisms whatsoever.
If I move into a house, this is the only time I'm pausing, by the way. If I move into a house that has a crawl space in it, no lock, I can't barricade or nothing. I don't want that room.
So it wasn't uncommon for it to open up by itself when swindled by a draft.
No.
It's impossible to close the door behind you once you get beyond it and
Oh
enter
my
the
God.
crawl space type area that it leads to.
You know
I've
someone
lived
living
in this
there.
house for 5 years now, and for the first 4, I never gave the door a second thought. It wasn't until the 5th year that the door started making me feel unsettled.
What?
A few months ago, I was home alone. I'm 17 and I live in the bonus room, which is why it is connected to the crawl space. I had been upstairs playing on my PlayStation when the house phone rang. Normally I would answer the one I had upstairs, but I unplugged the charger and it died. I sprinted down the stairs in order to answer the phone. My 2 dogs who were up there with me were still at my heels. I picked up the phone. 1-800 service, of course. I let the dogs out back. I remember vaguely what happened. I opened the door. 3 beeps from the alarm system notified me, and then I closed it.
Okay.
Before going back upstairs, I went to the bathroom. While using the bathroom, I heard 3 beeps notifying me that a door had been opened. I didn't give it a second thought because I assumed my parents had just gotten home.
No.
Except I didn't hear their footsteps, and there were no voices. I got out of the bathroom and checked all 3 doors. The front door was locked, the garage was locked, and the back door was unlocked, but my dogs, who were a husky and a German shepherd, wouldn't have let a stranger near them without attacking them. I let them both in and locked the door. Maybe I just imagined it. I did have a pretty vivid imagination, and I do get a little paranoid when I'm home alone, so it wasn't out of the question. Hell, maybe I didn't close the back door all the way. Who knows? What I do know is that all the doors were locked or guarded by dogs when my parents left. It wasn't long after that when I would wake up in the morning and the door would be wide open. Sure, it did that once or twice over the course of my living here, so I could rationalize it, but I was still a little creeped out. But recently, it's been open in the morning at least once a week. So I told my parents, and they went out and got a latch for the door to keep it closed. This was such a relief. For about 3 weeks, the door was never opened. Then one day, I came home from school, and the latch was lying on the ground, next to the open door. That's around the time I started sleeping with a knife at my bedside. I put the latch on over and over, but every time I left for more than a few hours, it would have fallen off.
You know
I was
someone's
worried
in there.
and I didn't try and hide it from my parents. I told them time and time again the door was still opening. They blamed it on the cheap latch and told me I should just really get over it. I was almost 18 and would have to get over my fear of the dark eventually. Except it wasn't the darkness I was afraid of. I was afraid of whoever was living in that crawl space. One day I went down for breakfast and my parents just both stared at me solemnly. I asked what was wrong, if I had something in my teeth, and they just kept looking at me, as if I had done something to be ashamed of. "We heard you last night," my father said sternly. "Heard me doing what? Snoring?" "I'm sorry, it's just I've been having a lot of trouble sleeping." "No, not snoring. We heard you rummaging through the kitchen last night. Didn't we tell you that's bad for your digestion?"
Now you know someone lives in that
It didn't help
crawl
that you were
space.
slamming cabinets at 3 in the morning, waking everyone up.
Nope.
If you're hungry during the nights, just eat more dinner. You know we have plenty of food, so you don't have to starve yourself, he finished. Dad, I didn't get up last night. I hadn't. I think I would have remembered if I had. Oh really? It wasn't you? He said sarcastically, like I was trying to fool him, but I wasn't. Yeah, Dad, it wasn't me. Don't lie to me. I'm not, I swear. Maybe you were sleepwalking? It sounded just like the way you walk whenever you go to the bathroom at night, and I could have sworn I heard your door open. Dad, I haven't sleepwalked in years, you know that. That's when the reality of the situation hit me. Well, you're the only one who likes cherry coke, so unless it was a damn ghost in the crawl space, I don't know who else it could have been, he said,
ghost.
Then checking his phone.
It's a ghost.
Shit, I'm gonna be late. I love you, son. Stop starving yourself. He then walked out the door, closing it behind him. 3 beeps. I didn't sleep much after that. Most nights I would have the TV on and just look at the door, latched, locked, and all. I still had school, so the latest I would stay up with a good conscience was usually 4, knowing if I stayed up later the next day, I would want to kill myself. But even then, I would sleep for only 2 hours, and when I woke up, the door would be open, latch lying on the ground beside it. Eventually, the door would be open every morning. I decided it could no longer be a coincidence, and I had to do something about it. The night came where 4 a.m. came around, and I turned off my TV and I laid there, waiting. About 30 minutes later, the first push came. Slow but strong. Then another push, and then another.
No.
On the 4th and most powerful push, the latch fell to the ground, and the door slowly opened. I waited, eyes squinted to mimic the look of sleep. His head poked out. Whoever was in there may have been human, but I doubt it. The lights were off, so I can't be sure, but once the door was completely open, it made its way out head first, using his arms to drag him through the opening. Once he pulled his entire body out, I could see the silhouette of what seemed to be a thin, hairless man. He lunged towards me once, propelling himself with his forearms. I could hear my heart beating, and I know it could hear it too. My breaths got louder and deeper, and I almost started weeping. His hairless head turned slowly towards me. I could feel its glare burning through my skull. Taking quick, silent lunges towards me, I heard it make its way over to where I slept. I dared not open my eyes, but I could hear it sniffing in the air. I sensed its presence directly beside me, level with my face. My heart beated faster and my breaths got louder. That's when it got closer, facing the side of my face, breathing directly onto me. My eyes were still closed, but I heard him open his mouth and close it, clacking his teeth together. Soon he turned around and crawled on all fours back into the crawl space. I heard creaks and cracks as it made itself at home in the crevices of our walls. Just when I thought it was safe to open my eyes, just slightly, I heard it rise from within the crawl space. The pitter-patter of his hands and feet against the wooden door. I shut my eyelids as tightly as I could. It made its way back to the still open door, and then something fell. It turned back and made its way back to its home in the crevice. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, and when morning came, I didn't get out. Alex, my father screamed. If you don't get out of bed right now, you're gonna be late. Get up. Sorry, I just had this really bad nightmare. I'll be up in a sec.
That ain't no nightmare.
I have to go, he said. Door closed. 3 beeps. I walked over to the crawl space door to close it.
It was open, wasn't
I
it?
looked down and next to the lock was an empty cherry Coke can. I need to get out of this house soon.
Yeah. 20 creepy 2-sentences story. Let's go. I'm gonna let this one play because part 2 is after this one.
I woke up to hear knocking on glass. At first, I thought it was the window until I heard it come from the mirror again.
No.
The last thing I saw was my alarm clock flashing 12:07 before she pushed her long, rotting nails through my chest, her other hand muffling my screams. I sat bolt upright, relieved it was only a dream, but As I saw my alarm clock read 12:06, I heard my closet door creak open.
Nah.
Growing up with cats and dogs, I got used to the sound of scratching at my door while I slept. Now that I live alone, it's much more unsettling.
No.
In all the time that I've lived alone in this house, I swear to God I've closed more doors than I've opened. A girl heard her mom yell her name from downstairs, so she got up and started to head down. As she got to the stairs, her mom pulled her into her room and said, "I heard that too."
I know that story.
My wife woke me up last night to tell me that there was an intruder in our house. She was murdered by an intruder 2 years ago. I awoke to the sound of the baby monitor crackling with a voice comforting my firstborn child. As I adjusted to a new position, my arm brushed against my wife, sleeping next to me.
No.
I always thought my cat had a staring problem. She always seemed fixated on my face, until one day when I realized that she was always looking just behind me. There's nothing like the laughter of a baby, unless it's 1 a.m. and you're home alone.
No.
I was having a pleasant dream when what sounded like hammering woke me. After that, I could barely hear the muffled sound of dirt covering the coffin over my screams. "I can't sleep," she whispered, crawling into bed with me. I woke up cold, clutching the dress she was buried in. I begin tucking him into bed and he tells me, "Daddy, check for monsters under my bed." I look underneath for his amusement and see him, another him, under the bed, staring back at me, quivering and whispering, "Daddy, there's somebody on my bed." You get home, tired after a long day's work and ready for a relaxing night alone. You reach for the light switch, but another hand is already there. I can't move, breathe, speak, or hear, and it's so dark all the time. If I knew it would be this lonely, I would have been cremated instead. She went upstairs to check on her sleeping toddler. The window was open and the bed was empty.
Wow.
Don't be scared of monsters, just look for them. Look to your left, to your right, under your bed, behind your dresser, in your closet, but never look up. She hates being seen. My daughter won't stop crying and screaming in the middle of the night. I visit her grave and ask her to stop, but it doesn't help. After working a hard day, I came home to see my girlfriend cradling our child. I didn't know which was more frightening, seeing my dead girlfriend and stillborn child, or knowing that someone broke into my apartment to place them there.
No.
There was a picture on my phone of me sleeping. I live alone. The last man on earth sat alone in a room. There was a knock on the door.
Bro.
She wondered why she was casting two shadows. After all, there was only a single light bulb. The grinning face stared at me from the darkness beyond my bedroom window. I live on the 14th floor. Working the night shift alone tonight. There's a face in the cellar staring at the security camera. I enter the empty elevator and push the button for my floor. As the doors close, I feel a hand cover my mouth. It's hard fighting the urge to hurt myself. My only comfort is knowing that I can hurt the girl in the trunk instead. The problem with sneaking out is that your parents have no idea where to look for you. By the time they find this cage, you will not be alive. The lights flicker. I put the pillow over my head so I won't hear the screams this time. I hear my son scream, so I rush upstairs to comfort him back to sleep. He doesn't believe me when I say everything is okay, perhaps because he sees the creature that followed me to his room. I burned the dolls even though my children cried. They did not understand my fear because they assumed I was who moved the dolls into their beds each night. You're laying in bed with your feet dangling out of the covers. You feel a hand grab your feet.
No.
I was having a pleasant dream when what sounded like hammering woke me. After that, I could barely hear the muffled sound of dirt covering the coffin over my own screams. I was watching TV one late night when I noticed a face in the screen. After squinting my eyes and getting a closer look, I realized the face was a reflection.
No.
I was alone in my house when I was awoken by a noise. I reached for my flashlight, but it was handed to me. I can't move, breathe, speak, or hear, and it's so dark all the time. If I knew it would be this lonely, I would have been cremated instead.
Dude, you're buried alive.
I was camping alone in the middle of the woods. The sound of the tent zipper woke me up from my sleep. I keep hearing my dad stomping around the hall while I try to sleep. I yell at him to be quiet, but then remembered he's not home. A flash of lightning momentarily illuminates your bedroom, and you see what exactly has been making the noise. The white figure right by your bed had a huge smile on his face. "Tilt your head to the side and cough, please," he said. Then the doctor walked in. I sat in the hotel room,
I just got that
staring
one.
at the portrait across from my bed. I thought it was a very dull and unpleasant painting, until I saw it blink.
Nope.
My sister says that Mommy killed her. Mommy says that I don't have a sister.
Santa Claus is coming.
My name is Tommy, and there was a time when Christmas was my favorite holiday. That was until my 7th Christmas. I still believed in Santa at the time. Well, not just believed in him. I was obsessed with the idea of Santa. Most kids have that idea at least once, that they should stay up all night and wait for Santa, but I doubt most kids have ever actually done it. But this was the year. This was the year that I decided I would wait up for Santa, for real. It was Christmas Eve night, a few hours after my family had left.
Okay.
I stayed up late like I always did, watching TV in my room. I think it was around 11 p.m. when my dad came to say goodnight to me. He always goes to bed early. My room was on the first floor of the house, and my parents' room was upstairs. I should note we lived in a huge house, and you couldn't really hear anything going on across the house. A little while later, my mom came up to tell me to go to sleep, and then shut my door. Of course, I didn't go to sleep. Instead, I got up from my bed and began to write a note for Santa to read. I only planned on secretly observing Santa. I didn't plan on speaking with him.
Okay.
I feared that if he caught me, he wouldn't give me any presents. On the note, I told of my love and appreciation for him, and what I wanted for Christmas in the future. I planned on placing this directly above the fireplace, just as soon as my mom would go to sleep, though. I grabbed some tape from my backpack and a flashlight from my desk. I then opened my door, tiptoed down the hall, and peered into the living room. I could see my mom placing presents under the tree. I tiptoed into the dining room and hid under the table, where I had a perfect view into the living room and the tree. This was the perfect spot to wait for Santa. After my mom finished putting presents under the tree, she grabbed a glass of water from the kitchen, shut the lights, and walked upstairs to her room.
Okay.
I got out from under the I got out from under the table and ran into the living room, taping the note above the fireplace. I got back under the dining room table and waited in the dark. The small light coming from the digital clock in the living room provided just enough light for me to see the tree in the fireplace.
Okay.
I waited and waited, but nothing happened. I felt myself starting to drift off until something brushed up against my leg. I shrieked and jerked back, turning around to see two eyes staring back at me in the dark. It was my cat, Jojo. I breathed a sigh of relief and shooed him off, for I thought he might blow my cover. He ran down to the den and out of sight.
Why?
A while later, I heard my stomach growl, and I knew it was time for a midnight snack.
Okay.
I got out from under the table and walked to the kitchen, checking the time on the way. It was around 1:30 in the morning. I couldn't wait around any longer on an empty stomach, but before I could open the fridge, I heard a sound coming from the den. I thought it was just Jojo at first, until I heard the sound of boots walking on the tiled floor. It was Santa. My heart nearly stopped from excitement. The footsteps neared closer to the steps, and I quietly ran back to the dining room table to return to my hiding spot. The footsteps began walking up the steps from the den into the living room. I could barely control my excitement. I was actually witnessing Santa in person. As the steps entered to the living room, I could see the Jolly Giant. A huge man dressed in a red coat and black boots, holding a sack, stood next to the tree. He just stood there for a few moments before walking up to the fireplace. He noticed my note. He ripped the note off the wall and began to read it. Then I heard Santa chuckle to himself and proceed to sit down on one of the couches, and then he crouched down. I couldn't see what he was doing, but I heard him shuffling around with what sounded like a bag in a box. He finally stood back up and placed something under the tree. I had actually witnessed Santa leaving me a present. He then turned around, picked up his sack, and walked back down to the den until his footsteps faded away. I felt it safe to get up now, but I didn't want to open the gift yet, so I went straight back up to bed.
Okay.
I was satisfied. I got what I wanted. I fell asleep seconds after climbing into bed, and morning came fast.
Yeah, of course.
I jumped out of bed, eager to get to the tree.
Okay.
The TV in the living room was on, but nobody was in the room. Normally on Christmas morning, my parents were always there to greet me. I immediately ran to find the present that Santa left me, and I found it. But it wasn't wrapped. It was just a box with a note sitting on top. I picked up the note. It was the note I had written, but it had a small response from Santa. It said, "I'm flattered by your admiration, Tommy. I hope you like the gift I left you. Go ahead and open it now." My heart started pounding with excitement. Suddenly I heard my parents yelling from the den. I quickly checked to see what was wrong and realized that the backyard window was shattered.
No.
And in the background, I remember hearing a news report about some kind of psychopath murderer. With my 7-year-old maturity level, I still found my priority to be opening my presents. I walked back to the tree and ripped off the lid of the box,
No.
and my heart sank to my stomach. In the box, staring back at me, was the head of my cat Jojo.
Yo!
I dropped the box, but I couldn't even get a scream out of my mouth. The head fell out of the box, revealing another note at the bottom of the box, and I still, to this day, remember what it said. "I hope you like your present, Tommy. Oh, and by the way, I know you are hiding under the table. See you soon, and remember, I see you when you're sleeping."
Oh, that is snow. I'm gonna exceed the hour mark. I'll watch 5 more videos, including this one. So after this one will be 4 more videos. This is an animated one. The phone call. Let's do it.
I don't think you guys should be getting on the road in this weather. I mean, the storm's not supposed to stop until morning.
Yeah, I know, but we have to spend time with your grandmother while she's sick. Just don't forget to lock up the doors when we leave. Oh, and if Uncle Joe comes by, just go ahead and let him in.
You're gonna wear a sweater walking
All right.
into snow like
Well,
that?
tell Grandma I said feel better.
Alright, well, we should be back around 5 tomorrow, so we'll see you then.
Why are y'all wearing that in the snow?
Unknown number. Ugh, must be a sales call.
Hey, Alex. How are you? I should be over in a few minutes. Alright, that's all. See you soon.
Huh. That's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't he using his cell phone? Hey, Jeff.
What?
Uncle Joe just called. He's gonna be here any minute.
Why?
I don't know.
Mr.
Just to hang out,
Creepypasta.
keep us company, I guess.
Whose idea was that? I don't want him here tonight.
Mom says he wanted to come over.
She just wants him here because she doesn't trust us. Anyway, I'll be in the basement watching TV.
Alright.
Nah.
Hello?
Hey, Alex. How are you? I should
Bro.
be over in
Yeah,
a few
hello,
minutes.
Uncle Joe.
Alright, that's all.
Wait,
See you soon.
Uncle Joe. What the hell?
You gonna try to call it back, okay? What? Better say no.
Jeffrey, where did the vibrating come from?
I have no idea.
Alright, I'm gonna try calling again.
Hey, Alex. How are you? I should be over in a few minutes. Alright, that's all. See you soon.
What the fuck?
No.
What? What?
What is that? What's in the closet?
Holy shit! Holy shit! Oh my god!
What? Jeffrey, what is it? Jeffrey, what is it?
Okay. I actually might watch more animated stuff in another video. Like, watching nothing but animated stories for a whole hour. I might do that sometime this week. 4 more videos left. So, creepiest things children have said.
There are 3 dead kids buried in our backyard.
No. No. Time to go. Time to go.
They told me where we could find them. My daughter had an imaginary friend named Sally. She told me once about how Sally was in jail for chopping her mother's head off. One night, I was babysitting my friend's children. The youngest, who was about 5 years old, drew a picture of a woman hanging from the ceiling.
What the?
She looked up at me and said, "She told me to draw this. She's coming for you. Hide."
No.
I was looking after my little cousin in Montana one night, and he started telling me about the creeper man who lives in his mom and dad's bedroom. He brings it up after he visits them. I made the mistake once of asking what he looks like. He said, "Oh, he doesn't have a face."
No.
I once babysat a girl named Sarah who used to love when I babysat. I know this because her mom used to tell me how she always requested me over the others. But Sarah took it a step further one evening and said, "When you die, I want to put you in a glass jar so I can keep you and see you forever."
That's creepy. No.
I lost my boyfriend to a stray bullet a few months back, and when I went to visit his little cousin for a few days after it happened, he came up to me while I was crying. He asked me why I was crying, and so I told him that I missed my boyfriend. He gets this confused look on his face and then says, "Why?" He's sitting on the front porch. I was cuddling my friend's 3-year-old son, and he said, very seriously, "I promise I won't ever chew on your bones. I promise."
What? I don't know.
After tucking him in, he said, "You know, I'd never killed anybody.
This is
They
why I'm
didn't
not
have to
having
take my
kids
arm,
for. This is why I'm not
but the
having
ground
kids
was all
anytime
covered in
soon,
my
bro.
blood."
I am not having kids anytime soon, man.
A few years ago, I was babysitting a friend's daughter. They lived in an apartment with a big patio window.
Okay.
She walked up to the glass door leading out to the patio and stared motionless into the night for several minutes.
You've got to be kidding me.
Shortly after, she runs into my arms saying, "Scary, too scary." She wouldn't let me put her down and demanded that I hold her and rock her for the next half hour.
No.
Eventually, she started repeating over and over, "The dark coming inside now. The dark coming inside now."
What kind of children are y'all raising, bro?
My friend and I were babysitting her 4-year-old cousin one night, and she really believed in all that reincarnation stuff and decided to test out her theories on her little cousin. She began asking him questions that he didn't quite understand, but then stated it simply. "What were you before?" He replied that he was a conductor and waved his hands in the motion that a conductor would.
What
The problem with this was that the little boy was born blind.
Huh.
I watched a few kids while their parents were at a movie. I put the youngest kid to bed and watched TV till the parents came home.
Okay.
The next day the parents called. According to the 4-year-old kid, I stood in the doorway and stared at him for a very long time, smiling. I was so confused and didn't know what to say.
No.
My little nephew used to talk about a woman who would visit his room at night. He said she wore a red dress, that her name was Franny, and that she would sing to him, and that she floats.
She float Pennywise, really? They all float.
I was looking after Jack, a 5-year-old, who said a man named Jacob who was dressed like a lumberjack was sitting next to me on the couch. He must have seen the shock in my face and said, "Don't worry, he doesn't have any arms."
Okay.
I was heading to the bathroom on the 2nd floor of my aunt's house when I saw my cousin April on the stairs. April was 4 and very animated. She was busy making funny faces while sitting on the stairs. I asked her what she was doing. She said, "I'm copying the lady with the braid."
What the?
I looked around. There was no one else but us. I asked, "Where is the lady, April?" She pointed to a beam running parallel to the stairway. I asked April, "What is the lady doing?" She said, "Making funny faces." I smiled and started walking up the stairs again when April said something that stopped me in my tracks. "Her braids is around her neck." I turned back and asked April to repeat herself. April pointed. "The lady is hanging by her braid. She's making funny faces." Then April started making a face which I then realized was someone gasping for air.
He's choking.
My niece is 4 and talks about her older sister constantly. She's always talking to her too. She's an only child and has no idea her mother had a previous pregnancy a few years back that was a mid-term loss.
No.
2 years ago, I was looking through my elementary school yearbook with my 5-year-old cousin when we were at a page with the 2nd grade class. She pointed to a boy's photo and said, "That looks just like Nicholas." When I asked who Nicholas was, she just said, "The boy in my closet," and kept on looking through the pictures.
No. number 1.
A few years ago, I was putting my friend's daughter to bed for the night.
Okay.
She was about 3 at the time, and she was fighting about going to sleep. She asked me why she had to go to bed, and I said, because it's late and it's time for little girls to get a good night's rest. She then pointed at nothing across the room and said, "What about that little girl?"
Dude, man. 2 more stories after this. I know I'm over an hour. I don't care, this is actually fun, so I'm gonna keep going. 6 weird and unexplainable phone calls. Let's go.
We are sorry. The number you have dialed has been...
Number 6.
In 2008, 19-year-old college student Brendan Swanson was driving home after a night out when he crashed into a ditch on a gravel road in the middle of nowhere in Minnesota. He knew as well as us that this was a classic horror movie setup, so he called his parents and asked for a ride. Swanson's parents had trouble finding him. When they couldn't find his car at the location he provided, they got back on the phone for over 45 minutes, trying to find him as he described his location. Swanson claimed he could see lights from a nearby town and was heading in that direction. But things took a turn for the creepy when he suddenly yelled, "Oh shit." Before his father could even scold his son for using such filthy language, the call cut off. And that's the last anyone ever heard from Swanson. Hundreds of volunteers, 34 dogs, and 120 days later, only his car was found. So what happened to him?
It's a mystery.
Number 5.
In the 1970s, Bashir Kauchaki opened up a successful restaurant in Washington, D.C. He was living the American dream, but in 1983, he became the target of an insane, non-stop stream of threatening phone calls that came several times a day, every day. In most harassment campaigns, the trolls get bored and move on to something else eventually, but Kauchaki would put up with these calls for nearly a decade. The caller earned the nickname L'Enfant, which we believe is Swedish for the child, because the caller eventually decided that he wasn't being creepy enough and began to mimic a little girl. Anyone associated with Kauchaki was a target, from his pregnant spouse to his restaurant employees. And the abuse got physical when the Star of David was scratched all over Kauchaki's Mercedes. When Kauchaki traveled to Philadelphia to visit his sister, the calls kept coming even there. Things got so bad he suffered a mental breakdown and committed himself to a psychiatric ward. But the calls continued to his restaurant. The FBI eventually put a trace on the phone to confirm that L'Enfant wasn't an insane delusion, but it was even worse than that. The calls were coming from different payphones at such a frequency that it would have been impossible for only one person to have been involved. L'Enfant was a plot orchestrated by multiple people for the express purpose of driving Kauchaki insane. So the obvious question is, why?
Number 4.
In 1970, 25-year-old Donna Lass worked as a nurse at the first aid station of a casino in South Lake Tahoe, California. One day, Lass's boss and landlord both received calls from an unidentified man who claimed she was dealing with an illness in the family and would be out of town for a while. Lass's boss became suspicious and contacted Lass's mother, who confirmed that the story was bull. Lass's car was found parked outside her apartment, but there was no trace of her anywhere. The last sign of her was an entry she'd made in her logbook near the end of her final shift. The entry looked unfinished, as if someone had interrupted her. No one could figure out Lass's whereabouts or the identity of the caller, until the San Francisco Chronicle received a mysterious postcard 6 months later. It was addressed to reporter Paul Avery. The postcard was the latest in a long line of cryptic messages from the Zodiac Killer, one of the most infamous unidentified killers of all time. The killer made no direct reference to Lass, but hinted that he had murdered and buried his 12th victim in Lake Tahoe. Since Lass's body hadn't been found, it wasn't hard for investigators to make a connection. The postcard provided a lot of clues about Lass's possible location, but a search of the area turned up nothing. To further complicate matters, Zodiac was known for screwing with the authorities. He claimed to have killed dozens of people, but officially he has only 5 murders on his resume. Furthermore, Lass doesn't fit Zodiac's profile, since he wasn't known for hiding bodies. But that leaves a huge mystery about a vanished nurse and an unidentified man who tried to hide her disappearance.
She's dead.
It's still not known for sure what happened to Donna Lass.
She gone.
Number 3.
In 1931, there lived a man named William Wallace, who worked as a London insurance agent,
That's a very creepy
and he had
picture.
an obsession for chess. One night, Wallace showed up for a chess club meeting and found a telephone message waiting for him. The sender wanted to meet at 7:30 the following night so he could purchase a policy. Wallace hopped on a streetcar the next night and traveled across town. He discovered that the address provided didn't exist, so he headed back home, probably convinced that he was the victim of a dumb prank. But when he got home, he found his wife's body. Julia Wallace had been beaten to death, and the mysterious caller was the obvious suspect. But after an investigation, police revealed that they determined that the caller was actually William Wallace himself. Authorities argued that Wallace had left the message to fabricate an alibi, killed his wife, hopped on a streetcar, drove around for an hour, then went home to supposedly discover his wife's body. This argument was invalid. It was completely impossible for Wallace to have committed the murder. The jury found Wallace guilty anyway, but luckily the Court of Criminal Appeal immediately overturned the conviction. The killer was never identified, but the prime suspect was a former employee of Wallace's insurance firm who allegedly asked his wife to provide him with a fake alibi and was seen wearing bloody gloves and hosing down his car on the night of the murder.
Number 2.
In 1965, a young woman named
These
Judith
stories are getting
Iams
crazy.
disappeared from her hometown of Coral Gables, Florida. Everyone feared the worst when her abandoned car was found in Atlanta with blood in the back seat. Iams was pregnant and a recent divorcee. She allegedly made arrangements to get an illegal abortion from a Hungarian doctor named George Hadju. He was charged with conspiring to perform the abortion, but skipped bail and fled the country. After this, the case was forgotten for a quarter century, until it was rejuvenated by a series of bizarre phone calls. In 1990, the Coral Gables police captain Chuck Smith received a message from Omaha, Nebraska radio host claiming he had information about Iams' disappearance. Smith called the host back, but the host was completely confused. The host said he never made the call and he knew nothing at all about Iams. Smith soon received another anonymous call claiming Iams was alive in Omaha. Smith knew nothing about the case, but he had recently traveled to Omaha to deliver a lecture at a police academy, and he started to wonder if this was a prank. Smith got a third anonymous call from someone who claimed to be an FBI informant who had recently spent time with Dr. Hadju in Hungary. They even provided an old phone number for Hadju that checked out. Smith was confused but did what any police officer would do with a baffling case. He took the story to Unsolved Mysteries. Days after the Iams episode was broadcast, Smith got an anonymous letter confirming what many people suspected all along. Iams died during an illegal abortion and wound up in a watery grave. Well, that's the logical solution. It doesn't account for all the strange calls. The callers and writer haven't been identified, the doctor hasn't been found, and Iams' body was never recovered.
Number 1.
Sometime after 10 a.m. on a routine workday, an Oxnard, California switchboard operator received a call from a whispering woman claiming the President of the United States was going to die in 10 minutes. That time passed without incident, but the woman, still on the phone, insisted that President JFK was going to die at 10:30. She continued to babble away with cryptic statements like, "The Supreme Court, there's going to be a fire in all the windows," and "The government takes over everything, lock, stock, and barrel." The call finally disconnected at 10:25. Naturally, the call was written off as the ramblings of a crazy person. The president gets nonsensical death threats multiple times a day, and the president wasn't even in the state of California, so there wasn't much cause for alarm. While the call was taking place, President Kennedy was traveling in a motorcade. The exact time of Kennedy's death was 10:30. Disturbingly, the woman's prediction was exactly correct. It gets even weirder. Kennedy was scheduled to arrive in the plaza before 10:30, but the motorcade ran late because President Kennedy kept stopping to shake hands with onlookers. Halfway through the call, the operators thought they heard the woman put the phone down and dial another number, and when they asked if she needed help, she responded, "No, I'm using the phone." It was after this that she bumped the time of the president's death from 10:10 to 10:30. It's still completely unknown who made the call or how she knew it would happen and when.
No. One more video after this. I'm done. So I'm gonna change the title. Watching scary stories and stuff for, I'll say, an hour and like 20-30 minutes or something. Actually, nah. No, I kept y'all long enough. This will be the last one. This is the last one. And then I'll come back with an animated one sometime later this week when I'm not tired. It's about to be midnight. 15 sadistic medieval torture methods. This one's graphic, so there you go. Let's go. Last video. My bad. I didn't mean to pause it.
The Middle Ages was definitely a darker period in human history.
Yeah.
If you were a criminal in those times, instead of death by electric chair or death by firing squad, you would experience something much worse. Death by skinning or death by boiling water. The pain caused by these torture techniques is unimaginable and will surely make you cringe just thinking about them.
Okay,
Number 15, the rat cage. The
I know
victim
this
was
one.
made to lie down and tied to the bed. At the same time, there was a box placed over his stomach. The enclosed box was often filled with rats. Often, the box or cage would be heated, forcing the rats to have no other choice but to dig their way out through the stomach of the victim and dig out the intestine and everything else in order to save its life. The rats normally survived, but the victim's death was almost always assured. Number 14, amputations. The victim was made to sit in an isolated room. With each passing day, some part of his body was being cut. It started with the pricking of hair, then the nails, and then moving on to the mainstream body parts.
Jesus, man.
Every part of the body was cut off, from the fingers to the hands, and from the genitals to the legs. The death of the victim was certain. The only question was how long they could survive this torture. Number 13, the chair of torture. Also known as the Judas chair, it was a horrifying, intimidating torture device that was added to dungeons in the Middle Ages. Used until the 1800s in Europe, this chair was layered with 500 to 1500 spikes on every surface, with tight straps to restrain its victim. Made of iron, it can also contain spaces for heating elements beneath the seat. It was often used to scare people into giving confessions as they watched others being tortured on the device. Number 12, breast ripper. Known in another form as the iron spider, or simply the spider, this was a torture instrument mainly used on women who were accused of adultery or self-abortion. The instrument was designed to rip the breasts from a woman and was made from iron, which was usually heated. The tool was commonly used in Germany and France until the 19th century. Number 11, tongue ripper. Looking like an oversized pair of scissors, it could effortlessly cut the victim's tongue. Their mouth would be forced open with a device called a mouth opener, and then the iron tongue ripper would uncomfortably twitch the tongue with its rough grippers. Once a firm hold was maintained, the screw would be firmly tightened and the victim's tongue would roughly be torn out. Number 10, Iron Maiden. This torture device consisted of an iron cabinet with a hinged front and a spike-covered interior sufficient enough to enclose a human being. Once inside its frame, the victim would be unable to move due to the great number of steel spikes impaling them from every direction. The interrogator would scream questions at the victim while poking them with jagged edges. Number 9, the Brazen Bull. Also known as the Sicilian Bull, it was designed in ancient Greece. A solid piece of brass was cast with a door on the side that could be opened and latched. The victim would be placed inside the bull and a fire set underneath it until the metal became literally yellow as it was heated.
Yes.
The victim would then be slowly roasted to death, all while screaming in agonizing pain. The bull was purposely designed to amplify these screams and make them sound like the bellowing of an actual bull. Number 8. Hanged, drawn, and quartered. During medieval times, the penalty for high treason in England was to be hanged, drawn, and quartered in public, and though it was abolished in 1814, it has been responsible for the death of thousands of people. In this torture technique, the victim is dragged in a wooden frame called a hurdle to the place of execution. They would then be hanged by the neck for a short period of time until they are near death, followed by disembowelment and castration, where the entrails and genitalia are burned in front of the victim. The victim would then be divided into 4 separate parts and then beheaded. Number 7. The wooden horse, or Spanish donkey. One of the torture devices during the Spanish Inquisition and medieval ages, this is possibly one of the most gruesome of them all. The victim is put astride, naked, on a donkey-like apparatus, which is actually a vertical wooden board with a sharp V-wedge on the top of it. After that, the torturer would add varying weights to the victim's feet until finally the wedge sliced through the victim's body. Number 6. The pear of anguish, or choke pear, is the modern name for a type of instrument displayed in some museums consisting of a metal body, usually pear-shaped, divided into spoon-like segments that could be spread apart by turning a screw. This torture gadget was used in numerous ways. It was inserted into the mouths of heretics, blasphemers, or just disturbers of the peace. It could have been inserted into the rectums of people convicted of sodomy. Homosexual men were especially vulnerable to this. It could have also been inserted into the vaginas of women convicted of adultery or even abortion. Once it was inserted into the victim's body, the 4 leaves would be spread out, mutilating the victim. Number 5. Judas cradle. The victim would presumably be placed in the waist harness above the pyramid-shaped seat, with the point inserted into either their anus or vagina, then very slowly lowered by ropes. The subject is tortured by intense pressure and stretching of the orifice, eventually succumbing to tears in muscle tissue that could turn septic and kill from infection, or simply by being impaled. Number 4. The rack. This was a torture device consisting of a rectangular, usually wooden frame, slightly raised from the ground, with a roller at one or both ends. The victim's ankles were fastened to one roller and the wrists are chained to the other.
Yeah, they're gonna get stretched out.
As the interrogation progresses, a handle and ratchet mechanism attached to the top roller are used to very gradually increase the tension on the chains, inducing excruciating pain. By means of pulleys and levers, this roller could be rotated on its own axis, thus straining the ropes until the sufferer's joints were dislocated and eventually separated. Commonly, the muscles were stretched so excessively they lost their ability to contract, rendering them ineffective. One gruesome aspect of being stretched too far on the rack are the loud popping noises made by snapping cartilage, ligaments, or bones. Number 3. Flaying. Skinning alive, also known as flaying, was one of the most gruesome execution methods ever conceived. Especially prevalent during the classical antiquity, it was used mostly on captured soldiers and dangerous criminals. In the most used method of flaying, a person's hands were tied above his or her head, while the executioner gradually cut off all the skin using a very sharp knife, starting at the face. Commonly they would start at the feet and work their way up to the head. However, the victims would normally die before the torture even reached the chest. Oftentimes, attempts were made to keep the skin intact. Another method involved severely burning the victim and then gradually peeling his or her skin off. Number 2. Saw torture. Saws were common torture devices because they were readily found in most houses and no complex devices were required. It was a cheap way to torture and kill a victim accused of witchery, adultery, murder, blasphemy, or even theft. The victim was tied upside down, allowing blood to be diverted to the brain. This ensured that the victim maintained consciousness for as long as possible. It slowed the loss of blood and caused maximum humiliation. The torture could last for several hours. 2 men would begin to saw the victim from the genitalia as far down as they pleased. Number 1.
Gotta cut them in half.
The Catherine wheel, also known as the breaking wheel, was a medieval torture and execution device. The criminal was tied to a large cartwheel with his arms and legs stretched out. The wheel was then slowly revolved while the executioner smashed his limbs with an iron hammer, heavy metal bar, or even using another cartwheel, breaking the bones in many places. After the bone-shattering process was complete, severed limbs of the person were woven between the wheel spokes. If a merciful execution had been ordered, after all the bones were shattered, the fatal blow, known as the blow of mercy, was then delivered, breaking the person's chest and neck and causing immediate death. After the execution, the wheel was often placed on a tall pole so that the birds could eat the body of the sometimes still living criminal. If he survived the initial blows, it could take up to 2 or 3 days for him to die of shock and dehydration.
Nah. Nope. I'm so glad I wasn't around in the medieval times. We did it. We did it. I know y'all ain't gonna watch this whole video, bro, but if y'all do, I commend you for it, bro. I commend you for it. I went an hour and 25 minutes. I said I was gonna go an hour. I went 25 minutes over. So I'm gonna change that in the title. But hope you guys enjoyed the stories, the countdowns and stuff like that. I'm gonna do one for the animated one, but it will actually be an hour long, maybe not. I might go over that one too. Well, I'll do that sometime this week, probably later this week or something. But hope you enjoyed. I'm about to go to bed now. Share, like, subscribe, comment down below. And I know you're not gonna watch the whole video, but I guess we'll see about that. Bye, guys.